Well, we have this great opportunity to now respond with some questions for Professors Arrow and Peltzman, so have at
it. Brian Bruns. I'd like to ask whether you think the change in transaction costs represented by the internet does offer any relevant opportunities in terms of the kind of incentives and opportunities for professional archiving, either open access journals, self-archiving, publish, then filter, and these kind of opportunities, to the extent they may be relevant, particularly for young scholars and doing the kind of work you're trying to encourage.
Are you addressing this to me? It sounds like you're addressing this to me. Are you addressing this to me? Yes. You want a one-word answer? No. The reason is that journals have become they've become certified. Nobody actually reads print journals anymore. When I communicate with authors, I say, and I'm not going to let my readers. I'm not going to impose this kind of stuff on my readers. You better shape up, or get. But there are no readers. There's a mythical set of readers that we're kind of trying to appeal to, and they read most of that stuff. Those who actually do read today read online. So the technology is of the actual transmission is going on, but. Our role is certification. That's why you have the peer review process and all of that sort of thing. So I said, if you want a one-word answer, it's the online journal that's open to anybody, if that's the model that you're thinking about. Sure, it helps, but it doesn't provide the certification. And I think in the I'm many years now removed from the tenure process. But I think that difference is going to be decisive. Somebody is going to ask, well, did they get an article published in these journals, those that are known for imposing the highest standards? And you can't ask that question about an open source online kind of journal. So I don't think they're going to play. They'll certainly play a role in the transmission and the discussion of ideas, but they're not going to decisively upset this the current paradigm on their own. That's going to have to come from within the profession. It's going to have to come from within the standards that are that get reflected in the traditional review process.
Okay, time for more questions in the back.
I would like to ask a question about, so nowadays it takes so long to publish a paper in economics. It might take a year probably. And, by the time you publish, the problem is probably, it's already not current. Or do you think it should be changed, and how it should be changed?
Do I think it should be changed? I told you I think that there more resources should be devoted to the editing process. Why does it take twice as long? I've lived through this whole period when I was a young academic. You submitted something, the editor said yes or no, and it got published. Now it takes at least twice as long. There are a couple of things. First of all, the flow of papers is enormously greater. That's to begin with. You're dealing with a proliferation of journals, a proliferation of manuscripts. The other thing are the professional standards the stuff that I got away with when I was your age. It boggles the mind when I get a manuscript that there's so much more polished. Even ones that I have to reject out of hand are much more polished So it's been said, I think Glenn Ellison is the best source on this because there's actual data in that his article on the rise in review times, that we spend now 95% of the time on the last 5% of an article. And how do you go back to a time in which you relax the professional standards, capture the 95% quickly? I have no good answer for that. I'm part of the problem in that sense more than I am the solution, because to remain a top field journal, the Journal of Law and Economics has to impose those professional standards. I think it's a combination of the flow is much greater, the standards are much greater, and the standards, really, a lot of the rigor applies to getting that last 5% right. And I don't know how you get out of that. Again, it's a collective action problem that you can see the way I'm talking. I'm not going to be the first one to do it.
Ken, could you say something about your views about the surge in outsourcing that's been taking place in business in light of these higher transaction costs for intra-firm activities, and whether you think we're going to see a reversal in outsourcing as firms begin to see higher transaction costs from that activity compared to relying on hierarchy and human-specific capital?
In view of the emphasis in your discussion and others on Ronald Coase's insistence on empirical knowledge, I'm going to be cautious in replying because I don't have any. Yes, one thing I'm aware of the fact there are firms now that almost only exist as places which outsource and do a minimum kind of combining. There are firms where the outsource is very large. In fact, it's a matter of definition. If you take a firm like Apple, where essentially all is produced by, was it Foxwell? Is that the name of the company? The Chinese company which actually does the manufacturing for them. So they outsource then the manufacturing, just do the designing. And they do most of their activities in Ireland, apparently, according to the tax returns. There always has been a question of having close relations between suppliers and firms. It existed when you have large firms. General Motors, for example, used to have a firm that did its bodies. Finally, they took it over. Of course, General Motors was a very innovative company for example, in multi-divisional, in its internal organization. They were the emphasis on multi-divisional firms. They were pioneers in that. But one of the things they did, they started out, and then they absorbed them. So that's what you're referring to here. There are certain kinds of specialized knowledge. You see it in professions. What is a professional? I mean, let's say a doctor or a lawyer. But let's take medicine as a classic example. Essentially, a doctor is a person with specialized knowledge. They have skills of other kinds too, but the most important feature is knowledge. And why do we have it? Why don't you take care of yourself? You actually know more in some ways about yourself than the doctor does. Well, the answer is they can use the same knowledge over and over again. And therefore it pays to have somebody really get an awful lot of knowledge, and then they can, because information, knowledge is a commodity quite unlike other commodities. You can give it away and you still have it. The difference when you talk about steel, if I sell steel, I don't have it anymore. I have the money, I don't have the steel. If I have knowledge, I can use the knowledge or give it away and still have it. That's how professors make a living. At least when they're teachers, which may not be the entire part of their lives, as we've just heard. So I think this is going to oscillate back and forth, really, but this is just guessing. I think the degree to which firms act as sort of middlemen, which varies an awful lot from firm to firm, but it's especially true in high-tech industries. It may not be a permanent. It may not be a permanent feature. It may again get concentration, but I'm not prepared to give any kind of forecast because I don't know, and it may be unknowable because it depends upon future events, future developments in technology, and so forth. There's no question that the ease of communication, the thing that you've been referred to several times, the fact that the cost of communication has gone down so sharply means it is easier. That removes one of the difficulties in inter-firm communication.
Sam? John Nye here.
Oh, there you go.
I have a question about the bias that Coase noticed about proving theorems, or proving hypotheses. I believe that some science journals now give instructions to the editors to allow negative results to be published. In particular, increasingly referees are told if the question is important and the methodology is judged to be correct, then they will publish it even if the results are ambiguous or negative. So that the presumption is if we need to know something about a particular disease or a particular relationship, then even a non-result is important, or a drug. Now, could you imagine, one of the things that would do in economics is that if that were to open up in some journals, it would eliminate frivolous questions with clear answers and allow one to publish negative results to important questions.
I like to think that we're open to negative results on important questions. Is there a bias toward positive results in economics? Yeah, I think it's clear that there is. Surely a positive result to an unimportant question has an advantage over a negative result to an unimportant question. But I'm not sure that it's that pat. I think whatever it is that's motivating them to do whatever they're doing in the medical sciences, the importance of the question still matters. Negative answers to important questions can be published. It's just harder. And it's an advertisement for my journal will not dismiss out of hand a negative answer, a negative result to an important question. We might reject it, but we won't dismiss it out of hand.
We have time for one more question.
Milton Root. My question is for you, Ken. In listening to you describe how the price system is not so good when your comment that the price system is not so good within the firm, but then it works so well on the scale of the economy. And this struck me as being very similar to some of the questions that people ask in the complex systems theory, where they distinguish between microsystem level and micro and macro activities. So you can have in these systems, I know you have a lot of background in this at one point in your career, you have macro system phenomenon that follow, that have stability and have characteristics that are distinguished from the microsystems of which they are comprised. So I'm just wondering if this question that you're asking is an analogous type of question, and if maybe it has some of these complex system implications.
That's a very good observation. Okay, that's a very good observation. Indeed, I think the economic system is this. The questions you have, for example, the same with evolutionary theory in biology. You have species, you have interactions among species, either competitive or complementary. I'm using economics language. I'm sure they use something else in biology. But yes, the typical type of a complex system is some microsystem, which is optimizing in a using that term extremely broadly, improving, getting better. But it's in a larger system, which is where you're engaged in relations with other species in competition for the land and so forth. We're, of course, seeing this on a very large scale with the relations between human beings and other kinds of life, where the interactions, the development of our species has had tremendous effects on the survival, for example, of other species and of and the uses of land, the use of common source of nutrition. Yes, I think the analogy is extremely good. In fact, I think the economic system is kind of a special form of an ecological system with macro and micro implications. And of course, that has rather, shall I say, pessimistic interpretations with the idea that we're going to get a great deal of knowledge. Understanding complex systems turns out, for example, let me give an example of something I happen to know about, the weather. I was a meteorologist at one point in my life. And here we have a system which the physics, the micro, is understood in a detail that economists can only, wish they could come in here, not close, but even anywhere like it. We understand when a raindrop falls, it emits as it gradually, it gradually vaporizes, and the energy transactions of that are understood in exquisite detail. Does it enable us to forecast the weather very well? Well, from the time I was involved in this, which ended in 1945, you understand, our ability to forecast has improved by about a day or two. And, I think we used to say 3 days, 36 hours was 72 hours was the longest period which you can prove significantly better than some totally arbitrary, fairly arbitrary, like saying the weather next 3 days from now is the same as today's. That's not a bad rule. But if you assume that anything requires skill, that the 72 hours is about as good as you could do. Well, today maybe 96. Some people even say 120, but I have some grave doubts. I think that's exaggerated. And this is with tremendous computers and using the physics on a far more detailed scale than was even conceivable because of the computing limitations. In fact, von Neumann's motivations in working on the computer were largely to improve weather forecasting.
Sounds a lot like economics.
And this is a complex, yes. But the point is we understand the micro in a way far better. That's the interesting point. And it doesn't help that much. I remember telling somebody when I was a student, economics isn't as bad as I thought.
Okay, well, let's give a great hand to